Hey everybody, it's Charlotte here, or Coco Yogi on OnlyFans. Today I'm going to be teaching you what I consider to be one of the most challenging postures in yoga, which is the middle splits, or Samakonasana in Sanskrit. I'm going to bring you through my 3 favorite warm-up exercises to get ready for the middle splits. And after this, hopefully you have some tools to bring you closer to the full expression of the pose. Let's get started. Our first warm-up pose is going to be wide-legged forward fold. But even for this pose, you need a tiny warm-up before you go wide-legged on the forward fold. So we're going to do a closed-legged forward fold followed by the wide-legged folds. The closed-legged fold, which is really standard in yoga practice, is called Uttanasana in Sanskrit, and the wide-legged forward fold is called Prasarita Padottanasana. You don't need to remember the Sanskrit, but it can be just helpful and nice to hear. Let's get into it. So, closed-legged forward fold, Uttanasana. And here you can put your hands on the ground for stability, or if you feel really comfortable, you can even take the hands to the ankles and bring your chest down closer to your calves. Once you've got 10 breaths, 20 breaths, whatever feels nice under a minute right here, then you can take the legs wide. And we'll find ourselves here in Prasarita Padottanasana. Once you're here, take your time letting your hips open and letting your chest fall toward the ground. And try to focus on bringing the belly button in between the thighs. Once you're resting here, you can also walk your hands to one side and then the other. And just let your torso hang heavy and bring your hips up toward the sky. Wonderful job. And that is Prasarita Padottanasana, or wide-legged forward fold. That concludes our first warm-up posture. Let's move on to the next. So the second of our 2 warm-up exercises is a wide-legged seated forward fold, which in Sanskrit is called Samakonasana. Just like our first pose, we need a tiny warm-up to do our second warm-up pose. So we're going to do what we all know and love as butterfly or Baddha Konasana in Sanskrit. So if you're seated, just swing your legs around in front of you, bring your heels and your toes together and open your feet up like a book. Straighten your spine. We don't want to round in the spine when we do any of our forward folds, as best as we can. And then grab onto your toes and hinge your hips forward and fold over your feet. You can spend 10 to 20 breaths here, whatever's comfortable to get the hips nice and active. And then after a little bit of time in our seated forward fold with the feet together, you can take the feet wide apart and scoot the hips forward to whatever degree is comfortable for you with the legs wide like this. And we'll walk our hands forward to find Upavishta Konasana, or wide-legged seated forward fold. If you're like me and you have a little bit of room in the hips, you can rest one cheek on the ground or on the mat. After about 10 to 20 breaths here, use your hands to walk you back upright. Bring the legs together and we are ready for our final warm-up pose. So now we have our third and final warm-up pose to get us ready to go into the full middle splits. And this is in English known as frog pose, or in Sanskrit, Mandukanasana. So to get into this pose, you're gonna plant your hands nice and securely on the ground and then walk your knees out wide as you can get them. You might have to scoot a little bit. And then once you're here, you're gonna make sure that your ankles are right behind your knees on both sides. And then you can sit up for a little bit, let the hips fall to the ground, and then come down onto your elbows and just rest in the stretch. You can even pulse forward and backward a little bit to just really open up the hip girdle. And you might even find that after a little bit of time in this pose, you can scoot the knees out a little bit wider. This is a great preparatory pose for the middle splits because it's basically the same thing as the middle splits, but without any of the pressure on your knees. And after 10 to 20 breaths in this pose, walk your hands back closer to your hips, and then you can take one knee in at a time to just be gentle on your hips and come back to a seat, and we'll get ready for Samakonasana or full middle splits. All right, we have finally arrived at our last pose for the day. We are ready to enter full middle splits or Samakonasana in Sanskrit. For this pose, you can use blocks to your aid if you are not ready for the full middle splits with your hips all the way on the ground. Blocks are a really helpful tool, so I'll show you with those first. With 2 blocks, you can essentially put the blocks right ahead of where your knees were in our last pose. So you can put one knee on either side of each block and then use the blocks to support yourself when you bring the feet out to do the full middle splits, so that you've got a little bit of assistance in the hips. So this is really nice because it can allow you to stay in the pose longer if you're working on getting all the way to the ground. But if you are ready, you can remove the blocks and just use your hands for support and send your hips all the way down to the mat. And if you're here, you can feel free to walk the hands forward and set the chest on the ground and take a little rest. And like any pose, you're gonna wanna stay in the pose as long as is comfortable. Usually 10 to 30 seconds or breaths is good. And if you're craving a little movement in the middle splits, you can sink your hips down and rock them forward and back. And whenever you're ready to come out, the best way is to shift the hips backward so that you can then bring both of your legs together in front of you. All right, wonderful job, everybody. That was our culmination final pose, Samakonasana or middle splits. Thank you so much for joining me today as I teach you a progression toward the middle splits, one of my favorite poses in yoga. Make sure you subscribe to my primary OnlyFans channel at Coco Yogi, and I'll see you again next time.